Hello there my friends, welcome to my another video. I've been wanting to do something civilian for a while and this is a perfect opportunity. This is a 1/72 scale Caterpillar D7 from a company Orange Hobby. I've never heard of them. So, let's get right into building it. This model has really good detail for such an obscure company and I was very excited to start it. So I start by cutting the parts out of the sprue normally with sharp side cutters, then I glue them together with a very thin Tamiya cement that's quick setting, so it dries basically immediately. It's just the normal stuff as always. I follow the instructions assembling the model. It goes together really well. I was very surprised by this. I would definitely get more models from this company in the future because for such a company I've never heard of, it's really good, but their selection isn't particularly perfect, so yeah, there's that. But still, the model went together really nicely. It's a very obscure vehicle that I've been wanting to build for a while, ever since I got it in my stash, and as you can see, the entire engine is included. All the parts are disassemblable for easier painting, and there is a bunch of PE that's very usable, and it adds a lot of detail to the main body. There's even an included metal exhaust that's done in the style of, the average metal barrel, so it's a really nice model and I've had a lot of fun building it. But of course, I don't want to bore you with another assembly, especially if we're doing something a bit different this time. So yeah, after I assembled the entire model, it was just right away time for painting it. Now the painting starts with a primer. I use Viejo Mecha Primer, the black one. I diluted it with a acrylic thinner and I started applying it in thin layers across the entire model, making sure I cover everything so it's in a one uniform color that's then easier to paint over. Is what I would say if I didn't decide to do this vehicle in yellow to enforce the feeling of it being a civilian vehicle and kind of use that opportunity. Yellow is notoriously really hard to spray over basically any surface, and black color is probably the worst color you can choose as a base coat for layer for yellow. So I was forced to use many thin layers across the entire vehicle, and it was very painful, and I encourage you not to paint yellow over black. It's way easier to paint it over white, for example, but once I got it done, I started a bit of post shading on this model as well, because I want this model to look three-dimensional and very nice. Basically, post shading method is using a lighter color to lighten up all the exposed areas that would be lighter on a real vehicle, to give it a three-dimensional look and to make it a bit lighter before, all the weathering darkens it down. So here you can see me painting the upper surfaces that are horizontal towards the middle with continuously lighter colors, and when the surface is horizontal, when the surface is horizontal, I paint towards the middle. When it's vertical, I paint toward the top. Basically how you would expect the light shine on the vehicle. This is a method I really enjoy using. There's of course more methods that can be probably better for this, but this is how I do it. When it's horizontal, I paint towards the middle, like when it's an upper part, and when it's vertical, I paint towards the top. The higher I am, or more towards the middle I am, the lighter the color I use. This also helped with all of the icky black still shining through the yellow, because it was more additional layers without actually being the layers of the base coat, but putting more work into it by adding additional layers that are already lighter. As you can see here, the model looks pretty good as it is right now, but of course it's an older machine, so I disassemble it after painting. It's time to paint all of the tiny details. paint the seat black according to my reference. I will later highlight it a little bit to make it look a little better. Of course, the yellow is the hardest paint to paint over something, but the second you paint it over something, it's really hard to paint any other paint over it because it shines through just because of how light it is. And this is just the struggles of painting yellow, I guess. But I managed with a few layers of black acrylic paint. I also painted the front lights with this color, just to pick them up a little bit. Also, I painted some of the knobs and some of the unscrewing bits with black as well. Then I proceeded to paint some of the bits that I knew would be definitely rusted out with a base coat of leather brown. That's mainly just the pipes that go towards the exhaust, for example. And also the tracks, which would in reality probably be painted yellow as well from the pictures that I've seen of these old vehicles. But of course, once they are 40 years old, constantly being used, they would get really scraped up and rusty. Here you can see me highlighting the seat. What I basically did was I mixed up continuously lighter gray colors and I just painted towards the upper parts. Now this would be better to be blended if you want it realistic, but I kind of liked this cartoonish painted on look. It's not something I'm sure I wanna keep doing on my models, but it's definitely an interesting artistic approach. So here you can see me basically not blending it, but keeping the layers a bit more visible in between, which kind of reminds me of how you would see it painted on a painting or something like that. Again, I'm painting more towards the upper parts to highlight areas that I would expect to be highlighted, the edges, stuff like that, just to give the seat a bit of a three-dimensional look. And I'm really happy with how it came out. Definitely a unique experience, because this is not something I would ever think to paint on a tank, of course, but this is a different vehicle. I then proceeded to start applying some washes onto the vehicle. Of course, first I varnished the model with a matte varnish. You would be better off with a glossy varnish if you're applying a wash, but I don't have one, so I use the matte varnish. I applied a dark brown wash onto the vehicle and I blended it around with a enamel thinner. Of course, the wash is enamel as well. This already darkened the model quite a lot, but this is an old grimy dozer anyway, so I didn't mind that much. Then I started chipping. Now from the last video with my mouse, you could see me chip with a sponge, and I found this to be one of the best methods for such a small vehicle if you want it to be very nitty-gritty and just precise and small when it comes to chips. Here you can see me using a really small sponge, just so the chips are as precise as I can make them. These are being done with an ordinary dark chipping color, a dark rust from Vallejo. In this case, you can use anything that you think suits your vehicle. This is just my favorite color to use universally for chipping rusty chips. With such an old vehicle, I could really go all out with this kind of weathering, and it was a lot of fun. I also basically chipped all over the dozer blade, and then I applied a light rust wash over all of the chipped areas just to blend them together with the hull. Some areas just got a really heavy wash because it just suited the area, and then I just blended it around until I was happy with how it looked. And this really made the vehicle look old and rusty and all of that. So it was time to make it a bit muddy as well. Decided to apply mainly just dust and dried up mud. According to references of these specific dozers, I applied the mud where I saw it getting caught on and then drying out. So on the insides of the tracks, for example. I also added some clumps of dried mud on the dozer because this is something you can't even do on a tank dozer, more or less, unless it's been used a lot, so it's an interesting detail. And with that, the dozer was more or less finished. It was time for the creative part.
This is a bucket.
So, for everyone wondering why there is a bucket here, you probably seen some dioramas with vehicles inside of helmets and stuff like that, which I always found like an interesting idea, but I wouldn't put a dozer into a military helmet. So, what's the best place to put your little dozer? Well, into a small little bucket that I found in a dollar store. So, of course, I had to rust the bucket out so it's not so shiny. I did this by chipping again, and it looks pretty good. It's not the main part of the diorama. Anyway, I stuffed the inside with some styrofoam, and then I started adding some smart mud from VMS to create a first layer of mud, or well, a crust, so that then I could apply another layer of VMS mud on top of this to create the terrain that I want. I didn't want this diorama to be complicated in any way or anything like that. Just made a little hill of mud, and then the the dozer is gonna be on the in the middle. I did kind of want this to look like the dirt is actually like put into the bucket and it's spilling out. So I did apply a lot of the mud on the edges, kind of just overhanging. I do really like this effect of kind of making it look like it's genuinely just like picked up mud with a tiny dozer. I also used the handle points for some hill of mud on the edge, and that's where the tree is gonna go later on. And then it was time to add some other details. I wasn't sure what I could add on such a tiny area, so I just ended up adding some small tiny pieces of concrete. Again, per reference, I saw one vehicle like this surrounded by concrete blocks, so that's what I did, and I think it looks pretty nice. Now, I've struggled with trees for a long time, and this fine bush from Ammo, which is basically just a piece of, I think, seafoam, is a really good supplement for trees. If you wanna just use it, you can use it for branches, like you make the trunk yourself and then you add this for the branches, or you can do what I did here, literally just tear a piece off, and it does look pretty convincing as a small tree, and that's all I needed for such a simple diorama. Of course, I would make something more complicated in the future for bigger dioramas, but here it fit pretty nicely. And then I started adding some more foliage, specifically these little tufts, self-adhesive tufts of grass. This is the easiest way for me to make standing grass because I don't have a static grass applicator, and adding static grass makes it lay down if you don't have the static grass applicator. So this is one of the easiest ways to make some convincing grass. I then started spraying over the mud a bit because I didn't want to prime this completely over, but I did wanna make it a little more realistic and a little more similar to the dozer. So of course I did spray this color over the dozer as well, and this is just another buff that's a bit lightened just to make it look like dust. I painted over the concrete blocks with some off-white, and then I put a layer of black over that while the white was still dry, so that was some wet blending that created some nice concrete looking concrete. Then I used some more vibrant buff for some detail picking, mainly the ruts of the tracks. The VMS mud acts like a sponge and it takes all of the paint really nicely, which I really like. I then added some darker brown as well into the holes in the ruts and whatnot, just to make the ground look a little more realistic and stuff. And the last part that needed to be done was the figure. Now I decided to do glazing method again, which basically consists of priming the model, well, the figure black, then I sprayed white over the top, then I started adding some really light glazes of color over this, which basically meant that the dark and white contrast shines through the color and it creates the shadows by itself. However, on the face I also decided to mix up some lighter colors, and then I picked up all of the details on the face and it made it look a little more realistic. So it's a combination of two methods that I really like. I still need to perfect this because I'm still not the best at it. This is my second figure more or less. But since I was pretty happy with how the face turned out, I then did the entire same thing on the rest of the figure. Again, a light, almost translucent layer of blue, followed by some highlights with a lighter blue and a thin brush. And then once the figure was done, I went over it with some Wargaming pin wash, a sepia wash in this case. Once that was done, all the details were nicely picked up, all the highlights were nicely light, so it was time to glue the figure into the diorama, and the diorama was done. So I hope you enjoyed this silly little project. I know I did. It's a really random thing to do, but I've been wanting to do something creative like this for a long time, and this was a nice opportunity to try a few techniques. I loved painting the old rusty Dozer, and I wanna get more into painting old rusty just civilian vehicles, but it's not really easy to get my hands on some models of those in 70-second scale, mainly because nobody makes them, right? Everything is just tanks or planes or whatever, and I will do more tanks, of course, because I love making tanks, but this was a fun little idea. I've seen a lot of people liking it on Discord servers. Also, it won me a medal on a model show, so I'm personally really pleased with it. But of course, tell me what you think about it. If you like it, leave a comment down below. I am really happy that you made it this far into the video. Again, I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, maybe subscribe or like this video, maybe share it with your friends, and I will see you in the next one. So, thanks for watching again. Goodbye.